Hello everybody, my name is TJ and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about a very special book in my opinion. It is Levon Chorbajian's The Making of Nagorno-Karabagh. This book, which is a collection of essays by a variety of different scholars and experts, is a very unique book, and it's unique for two reasons in my opinion. The first is that since most of the contributors are either Armenian or have been to Armenia and Nagorno-Karabagh, some even during the war in 1988 to 1994, the book takes a very Armenian perspective on the conflict in Nagorno-Karabagh. And I personally found reading an Armenian perspective on the conflict very illuminating and very refreshing. The overwhelming majority of books written by Western scholars on the conflict in Nagorno-Karabagh that I've read take a very pro-Azerbaijani perspective and consequently a very pro-imperialist perspective on the conflict. An example of such a book is The Right to Self-Determination of the Caucasus by Behrouz Believ. And Believ in this book, as do many Western or Azerbaijani scholars, in my opinion, seem far less interested in understanding the conflict in Nagorno-Karabagh as they do in justifying Azerbaijani oppression and U.S. and Western imperialist policy in Transcaucasia. So I found reading a Armenian perspective, which completely breaks with that orthodox kind of Western scholarly narrative, very refreshing and very illuminating. The second reason, or the second way in which this book is unique in my opinion, is that as I said earlier, since most of the scholars, most of the contributors are either Armenian or have been to Armenia and Nagorno-Karabagh, some, as I said, even during the war, this is the only book I've ever read in which the contributors or the authors are able to synthesize their academic expertise with their personal observations and personal experiences. Most books written on Nagorno-Karabagh by Western scholars, or I should say, in most books written by Western scholars on Nagorno-Karabagh, Nagorno-Karabagh is treated as something that's almost like a very abstract kind of entity, one that exists almost exclusively on paper. It's devoid of people, it's devoid of history, it's devoid of anything meaningful. It is simply a legal conundrum, so to speak, with, as I said, no history, no people, nothing. It's just a legal conundrum that needs to be solved through legal debates. And since this book is obviously written by Armenians, or some people who are Armenian and those who have been to Armenia and Nagorno-Karabagh, it was very illuminating to read, again, another break with the Western scholarly Orthodox narrative, how they're able to synthesize their personal observations and their personal experiences with the people there, with their academic expertise. So, again, I think this book is very unique for those two reasons. And a couple other things I'd like to say about this book. The first is I really enjoyed reading Levon Chorbajian's introduction, as well as Levon Chorbajian's, probably pronouncing it wrong, essay on Armenian irredentism, both because they provide such an excellent historical overview of Nagorno-Karabagh, and a very nuanced one as well. In my opinion, not, overly pro-Armenian, nor overly anti-Azerbaijani. Definitely anti-Soviet, but that's to be expected in a book such as this. You're never gonna encounter a pro-Soviet, analysis of Nagorno-Karabagh by Western scholars. So that's wishful thinking, but unfortunately not the case, and fortunately very unrealistic. But again, in my opinion, it's a very nuanced analysis, but also very thorough, and I really enjoyed that. One essay that really stood out to me, it was written by Armin Avizan. I don't know, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And what he or she did is made an interesting comparison between what if Israel bordered an interesting comparison between the current situation, the current geopolitical arrangements and tensions in the South Caucasus and Transcaucasia between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabagh on the one hand and Azerbaijan and Turkey on the other. And they did this by making an interesting comparison of a hypothetical Israel bordering a hypothetical Germany. And this Germany is obviously far larger and is completely undemocratic, denies the existence of the Holocaust, engages in armed raids in neighboring countries, occupies a part of another country, and is engaged in a civil war against one of its own ethnic minorities. How would Israel respond to this hypothetical Germany on its borders? And I thought that was really illuminating and very interesting, because I have never seen the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh conceptualized in such a way like that. But there's merit to it, in my opinion. Turkey is undemocratic. It does deny the 1915 Armenian genocide. It does engage in armed raids in neighboring countries, in particular northern Iraq. It does occupy part of another country, in this case Cyprus. It is engaged in a civil war against one of its own ethnic minorities, in this case the Kurds. So, and I think this analogy really highlights why there's such an impasse in resolving the conflict, is because, in my opinion, Nagorno-Karabakh and the Armenians inhabiting it, as well as Armenia, have very legitimate security concerns. Being surrounded by Azerbaijan, which is historically, violently oppressed its Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh, as well as in neighboring Armenia, such as during 1918 to 1920, again during 1988 to 1994 war, and Turkey, which has massacred and almost killed off the entire Armenian population, in 1896 to I think 1898, and then again in 1915, again in 1918 to like 1920, and it was as well as 1905. I forgot about that. And it's interesting because Western scholars, so many of them only see it, as I said, Nagorno-Karabakh as some sort of abstract that exists on paper. It's just like a legal conundrum. Whereas to so many Armenian people, it's a very real security concern. It's a very real, problem. And as one author in this book, I don't remember who, writes, he or she writes, when they were in Nagorno-Karabakh, they asked somebody there, and this was during, I think, probably 1992, 93, I can't remember when exactly, and they asked, why do you continue to resist? And this Armenian living in Nagorno-Karabakh responded, well, who wants to be a Palestinian? And I think that basically sums up why there's such an impasse between bourgeois international law on the one hand and the legitimate security concerns and historical, what are very grounded in history, concerns of the Armenian people in both Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, and why the Armenian people in Nagorno-Karabakh have struggled so much to separate from Azerbaijan. So overall, I think this was a fantastic book. I would highly recommend anybody read this book if they want to understand Nagorno-Karabakh and the conflict there. However, a couple of things that I thought were a little bit disappointing about this book are that it is a collection of essays, so not all of them are written as well as the others. Some are so abstract, like the one on the nation-nature nexus, which I thought was a little over my head. And I really would have wished a lot more of the essays dealt with Nagorno-Karabakh specifically, as opposed to as a afterthought of analysis of Armenia. So, but, under the circumstances, I don't know if that's entirely possible. Overall, though, I would highly recommend this book. I recommend everybody to read it. I will post a link to it and a description of it below on my video, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much.